All right. We are live.
Make sure you hit record on the switcher
Make sure we're
and the
recording, or
sound
we're live and we're recording from the
on the.
studio. You ready?
Ready
I
whenever
think I
you
sound like Jay-Z and Beyonce. Like you're
are. No, for your nightly news.
No, don't say that because people think I'm the news lady
Oh my
sometimes, right?
god,
No, yeah, that is the thing.
that's terrible.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell these wild anecdotes every once in a while, and I'm sure you have some too. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, welcome. We are live and coming to you direct from Content Factory. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Kristen Campbell. I am the owner of 40 Sports and Entertainment Group, and we're so happy to have you today for our very first live stream, The Huddle. We are in Hollywood, Florida, and we are going to talk to you about the intersection between sports, business, and some current event topics, specifically about name, image, and likeness. Hopefully, you like it. If you know somebody that's interested in name, image, or likeness, or has some family members that are interested in name, image likeness, please tell them to tune in. This will not be our first time, or will not be our last time going live. We will do this event every month, every third Friday of the month. So make sure you join us in person or online, and we're happy to have you. If you have any questions, hit us up in the comments. We're happy to have some feedback and want you to be involved. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today. He is a former D1 athlete from the University of Miami, wide receiver, comes from Mississippi, my hometown, my people's hometown. Was a five-star recruit coming out of Mississippi, and now comes as a producer as well as a brand coach. So
Yep.
I'd like to introduce Malik Mayweather. Thanks so much for coming on the Huddle this week. I'm
I
so happy to
appreciate
have
you
you.
having me. I appreciate you having me.
So Malik, we've met before. We've talked
Hmm.
before, specifically about branding for my own company. We've talked about being a CEO. We've talked about your experience with D1, and so this week with the Huddle, I'm really wanting to focus on as we've got kids going into recruiting season as they're trying to pick agents for the next level. Also, we've got individuals that are trying to figure out what name, image, likeness is and what it means for them. I want to talk about overall how name, image, likeness is really changing the industry. It was a little bit before you got to, or a little bit after you finished
Yeah,
school,
after
correct?
y'all reaping the benefits of stuff we didn't have. I ain't mad at it though. Go get your money, but do it smartly. So that's what we're
Right.
gonna talk about. Some.
Right. So I want to have you on today to talk about, from a professional standpoint, from my own personal opinion and professional opinion, and also your actual experience with
Right.
navigating college athletics. While although you were not able to actually make money, you saw kind of what was precursor to NIL, right?
Right.
So that could have been individuals like getting the bag, or players riding around in cars that maybe they couldn't afford necessarily, and where did it come from? But more so, I think, when we talked behind the scenes and off camera, we just talked about the future of college athletics and what NIL could really do.
Right.
And I think both you and I agree that there's opportunity to be had, but also there's, we want individuals and players and families to know there's also some warning signs that we want them to be aware of, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And those warning signs come with big red flags that sometimes get ignored because you can only see, the next few steps in front of you versus, what does it look like long term when it comes to NIL? What does this mean for my family? What does it mean for my own personal brand opportunities after sports? And how can I leverage this during sports and also build a team and do things like that to make sure it's not a distraction, right? So a lot of things that we went through when we were in college when it came to, you got people that are on scholarship and it's still like, I'm struggling to eat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right, we just got calf food, but we need more food because we're hungry. We're spending so many calories out there on the field, and it's just like you're not getting paid, right? So you're trying to scrape by, and then you figure out creative ways to make money or find more food and stuff like that, so that you can be healthy, so you can go out here and perform. Because at the end of the day, before NIL, it was the only way you getting paid is if you getting paid
Under the
like
table.
yeah, right under the
Or
table,
you got some nice
or you
benefactors back home, or
right, or you make it.
you make
Right,
it, right?
right, you make it.
So let's talk about NIL for those that don't know exactly what NIL is or what it stands for. So NIL is name, image, likeness,
Right.
right? And the significance of name, image, likeness in collegiate sports is that prior to 2019, like you said, and you were in school
2013 through 17.
2013 through 17. So while you were in school, you were unable to monetize your name, or you were unable to sign a deal for an endorsement. You were unable to probably even get a hot dog from somebody without it being a violation of NCAA rules, correct? Right? Compliance was like, I'm sorry, where'd that turkey sandwich come from, son? Did you pay for that? Right?
Exactly.
And so what happened in 2019, the Supreme Court decided that, you know what, student athletes should not be singled out as the only college individual or college student that is unable to make money while they are in school, right? And solely because your status as a student athlete, the NCAA could say, oh no, you're playing for the glory of the sport, right? While everyone else is seeming to make millions and if not hundreds of millions of dollars, student athletes were on scholarship and you took what you could get from that scholarship. So like you said, you had kids that are like, okay, well, my school is paid for, but what about the rest, right? Can you talk about some of the hardships that you saw, during school when players are trying to make ends meet?
I mean, you just have situations where it's like, people ended up trying to figure out how to move off campus because the check was bigger, right? And it's like being on campus is the fun of college, is the fun of, college sports, especially my freshman year, I'll never forget, because you couldn't move off campus and we had a time. But as you got older and you understand, okay, this is a money game at some point, I need to figure out how to move off campus to get that bigger check, because then I can have a bigger check if I'm splitting rent with roommates that are on the team or not on the team. I can keep more money in my pocket, and then I'm better off as a college student, especially down here in University of Miami. Like it's Florida, cheap. It's expensive, right? So
it's different than Mississippi cost of living, I would say.
Gosh. Anywhere in the Mid-South, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, anywhere, like cost of living there is second to this, like it's not even close, right? So down here you had to figure out different ways to be able to move around. Gas is higher, food is higher. If you want to have fun, you're a college kid, right? You want to go out, you want to do some things, you might have girlfriends, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like you want to do different things. And if you can't afford it, it puts you in a position where it's like, man, I'm busting my tail, I can't even afford to do this. And a lot of people are coming out of situations where they didn't have to begin with, and they come and say, okay, I have more than what I used to have, but some kind of way I still feel like I have nothing, right? And on top of that, I'm busting my tail. School isn't easy. University of Miami is a top academic institution,
right?
So you come into that not even understanding what school is like and how that factors into how you're going to build your career as an athlete, because you got to pass these classes too. So it's just a whole bunch of different factors that come into that money played a part in, right? Books are expensive.
Books are expensive. Like you said, you like to eat, I'm imagining, because coming out of high school, like I said, you were highly recruited, and again, going to not just a competitive academic school, but also competitive, athletic program, right? So you were no slouch. And so I imagine your expectations were, if I can get to the next level, I want to go to the next level, correct?
Right.
So you also, can you talk about, was there any preparation for that other than what you did on the field?
Oh yeah, you train all the time. Like I did hot yoga, right?
You got your stretch on.
Oh my gosh, I did hot yoga, and I want to say that room had to be 110 degrees.
Yeah,
Every day I walked out of there, 97 felt like AC when I was doing
breeze.
That. And I'm like, man, I did all this, and then you still get to school and you got to run 1440s and half gases, full gases, whatever, and it's still like you never were prepared. And you paid for hot yoga. You paid to train with speed trainers. A lot of stuff that's seen on social media nowadays as far as training, kids were doing back then, it just wasn't as highlighted, right? And that's become a part of things like NIL now. It's like, okay, well, I got to train for this, and I'm coming out of high school for that. So let me put myself in position to train with this trainer because he knows these coaches and has these eyeballs. And then what do trainers do? Okay, well, I have leverage. So let me up the price on that. So how do these kids afford it now, right? So all the things that I didn't get because NIL didn't exist in terms of like money and deals and being able to fund those things also have an adverse effect on kids nowadays who do have NIL, because now they still have to figure out how to afford those things to help them get to the next level.
I was going to ask you, those colleagues, those teammates that you had that might have, had some windfall and were able to get some money or more money than others that were on the team. Do you know if they had any kind of financial literacy, any sort of, way to prepare them to handle that money while they were there?
I mean, that's not nobody really, not even myself, right? And I don't come from a situation where, my parents or my family hadn't tried to prepare me. And some kids come from lesser situations and better situations. But at the end of the day, you're an 18, 19-year-old kid that is trying to figure out how to, when I get money, use it and not be stupid. But then you also have situations where it's like the glitz and glam of Miami.
It's still
Like
Miami.
South Beach is 15, 20 minutes away from Coral Gables, depending on which route you take. And we couldn't even afford Uber wasn't even invented back then, so we took cabs.
Right.
To start off that freshman year. And Ubers were invented while we were in school, or not invented, but they came to Florida when we were in school. But all that stuff costs money, man.
And you're visible, right? It's not
Oh,
like
my
I'm sure
goodness.
you and your teammates went out. They were like, they're probably like really good in biology. I'm sure most people could look at you and say, that guy probably plays basketball or
Yeah.
football. So there's probably a different sort of pressure to be out on
Yeah.
South Beach, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's definitely, you got to watch your back. There are people that are looking to take advantage of you. And again, that's where it comes into like just having vets and mentors on the team and stuff like that, and just other people that you can look up to. University of Miami is great because we always have people come back, right? Individuals that played here who had success here always came back to feed into the program and talk to us. And I give a big shout out to Coach Swayze because he
Coach
was
Swayze.
he was man paramount in terms of a lot of guys coming back and pouring into us because he poured so much into us. So with him, it was really, really important for those guys to come back and show us the way, have those talks, and understand exactly how we should go about being smart on South Beach, being smart in the clubs, etc. So that was heavy.
I know Coach Swayze. He has trained a lot of my athletes that I've had, and he's been definitely a wise. Yeah, shout out to Coach Swayze. He is quite a resource. What's some of the best advice you got from players that came back that you recall?
Goodness, I recall. I recall. Obviously, Ray came back. Michael Irvin came back, and it's crazy story. Michael Irvin, I met him when I was in like the 6th or 7th grade.
Really?
At a Melrose game when University of Miami was recruiting Greg Cooper.
Okay.
So I have a picture with Michael Irvin with number 47 OUM jersey on with the low cut because my dad still cut my hair back then. And
preacher kid cut.
Oh my gosh, I had it. But I had a picture with Michael Irvin, and then it comes full circle where he's coming to the camps and teaching us about being playmakers, having the right mentality, especially playing receiver, right? So, and at that point, I didn't play receiver. I played tight end in like 6th, 7th grade. So I was hell bent on being a receiver at that point. I even defied my father a little bit and told him when I went to the school, when I went to Olive Branch, I told him that I played receiver instead of tight end because they didn't have a tight end in their offense.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, I play receiver because I'm gonna catch this ball, right? And that's an ode to, like I said, validation for people like Michael Irvin, Leonard Hankerson, Reggie Wayne, all those guys that come back or that went through the program and did what they were supposed to do. I looked up to those guys for sure before I got to University of Miami.
And where they give you life lessons, where they give you money lessons, where they just like how to be a professional.
How to be a professional for the most part, because that's the standard, right? When you go to UM, you go there because you want to become a professional athlete, and there's something about being a part of the U Brotherhood that is a standard that's up here. There are individuals that I still call today. I mean, Duke. Duke is a part of my immediate friend group. Like you can't be out here not being accountable for your actions and acting crazy and expect that group with a Duke Johnson, with a Corn Elder, with any of those guys, you can't expect them to say, "Oh, nah, yeah, go ahead and do that." They're gonna say, "Nah, you tripping.
Right.
What's up with you?"
Because you're a reflection of us.
Exactly. So that's just the attitude that's there. You're trying to go pro. There are other guys that come by and give other life lessons, not necessarily in a public setting like a team meeting where they record them and you get the kind of Inky Johnson type motivational speeches from former players. Those conversations are great. That's great for social media, but the real ones happen at the end of a workout in the off season when people are coming back to train, when we're all out on the field and it's them dog days, or you in the training room and somebody walks through to holler at Vinny.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Those are the times where you really have a real connection that most people don't see.
So if you're just joining us, I'm Kristen Campbell. I've got Malik Mayweather here. We're talking about NIL. We're talking about collegiate sports. And I kind of want to jump into that professionalism, right? And the requirement of professionalism amongst your college teammates and those that came before you, but also just looking at professionalism when it comes to individuals that are interested in NIL. So as an
Gotcha.
attorney, as an agent, I'm looking at NIL as tremendous opportunity, obviously financial, right? For
Right.
those that are able to partake in it and are able to get colleges to, invest in their futures or
Mhm.
invest in their brands early on, right? But also I'm looking at that the fact that number one, the NCAA has essentially lost control of amateurism per se, which is
Yeah.
arguably if it was amateurism for the last 20 plus years or not. But they've kind of lost control of the direction of what's going on. So currently they're lobbying Congress to say, hey, put some guardrails on this, right? We've got to
Mhm.
control how student athletes are able to make money, right? It's okay, fine, we'll let them make money, but how they do it. So I think I'm glad you brought up for professionalism because where I see NIL as a tremendous opportunity, I also think I don't want it to be a cautionary tale, right?
Right.
When I got into this business, there was a lot of talk about players going broke. I think at the time I entered, there was a stat that said something like 70+% of NFL players go
Wow.
broke within 3 years of going or leaving the NFL. And so often when I talk to people, they're like, oh, you represent, football players. Those guys need to do this with their money. They should get financial advisors. They need to learn how to invest. But I personally think that professionalism and understanding what exactly you are doing with your time, what exactly you're doing with, translating what you do on the field to off the field, and how much time that takes to develop and understand what is required to really build a brand and
Right.
also build the business of what you do to become a professional. Can you kind of touch on again the requirements that you just had, like I said, professional, I guess
Mhm.
professionally meaning on the field, like it's in the workouts,
Right.
to your day as a student, and then did you even have time to think about what does my future look like if I wanted to be a professional athlete? Kind of run us through a regular day for a college athlete.
A regular day is, let's talk about camp,
Okay,
right? Let's talk about camp
so
first
give us the
because
setting. This is
so camp is
July, June.
camp is end of July,
Mhm.
early August, right before classes start.
Sweltering heat in Miami.
It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
It's actually like I go out now and I'm like, how did I practice in this
Hmm.
sometimes? Which makes me want to go back out and train even more because it's like I don't want to lose it. I don't want
You
anybody to feel like they can line up in front of me and I can't still do it because
hold on. So you're
I
saying
can.
that torture actually had some benefit later, or
Yeah, it definitely has some benefit, and
Mhm.
it's just great for you as a from a health standpoint, right?
Right.
As long as you try to keep and
Mhm.
maintain, you're pretty much set up for the rest of your life because of the type of training you did.
Mhm.
But just to go back into what you asked, a regular day camp wise is treatment starts at about 5:30 in the
A.M.
morning. Yeah, in the
Okay.
morning, 5:30. Then you go get treatment between 5:30 and 6:30. Then you have breakfast mandatory. You got about 45 minutes. So by 7:15, you're shooting back because you got your first meetings, whether that's position or special teams, just depends on the day. You got different installs. These things happen before we go out to practice. So we know what we're going to put in for practice because also we're learning the offense, but we also need to understand exactly what we're going to do going into this first game, which generally are non-conference, depending on what your program is or what conference they're in. You might be playing LSU, you might be playing Florida, you might be playing USC, Oregon. So these are big games to start the season. These aren't small games that you start off with. And how are we going to approach this based on film that we watched all through summer? So you installing that and you're going through all of that. You have people that get injured. How do we shake up the roster? Meetings, practice, lifts after practice. These things are all happening between 5:30 in the morning and 9 at night during camp
And you
before
still
classes.
have, I was gonna say, yeah, and you haven't even talked about class yet.
Right. And then once you get into that first week of class, the second week of classes, we start to end practice and go to class at the same around the same time that you would have during camp. But the difference is now you have classes and then you come back
Mhm.
for meetings or some extra film or maybe a lift depending on your class schedule and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you're still gonna go between 5:30 in the morning and 9 at night. It just depends on, your class schedule.
Mhm.
Instead of that 2 or 3 to 9 in the evening being all football meetings. Now it's class meetings, and hopefully you've learned the offense and you're still studying your plays after that because at the end of the day, somebody's trying to come take your spot, and coaches are recruiting to replace you. So
Mhm.
when you start looking at it from that standpoint, it's a culture shock to an 18, 19-year-old that doesn't have this mentality coming in.
Mhm.
And even more so now with NIL and people having these opportunities to make money, is a situation where you come in with expectations even higher than what they used to have for you. That you used to come in and say, all right, cool, he's a freshman, he probably doesn't get it yet, he'll learn, he'll grow, he'll develop. We see promise. Even though we're still going to recruit to replace you, we see promise will redshirt you. Now it's, I'm giving you NIL money. You need to play immediately, because if you sell tickets on Saturday and get people that, watch you, there's a potential that they'll pay attention to your social media. These people that are using and leveraging your audience to make money, and you get a piece of those ad dollars if your contract is structured right. You have that opportunity, and these are all expectations that weren't there, 6-7 years ago.
Right. And you also didn't have a transfer portal, correct?
Exactly.
Which now adds to, again, the leverage that a player might
And
have.
now, who are you coming out of high school? You're a high school kid. We probably gonna go take a transfer portal kid because he could play right away. And we're trying to go after this championship or this conference championship, or we're trying to rebuild our team and our program and implement, a rebuild for a program that might have used to be prominent and they're not prominent anymore. Like, how do we go about that? It's a business.
And we haven't talked about, again, the alignment of these different conferences, right? When
Yeah,
I was in college, and I'm not going to date myself, and if you know me, you know, but we don't have to talk about that. But
you're a young woman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. But let's talk, recently, like I said, I'm a graduate of Florida State. So recently we talked about, don't do that. Don't do that. I'll let you slide this time. But so, back when I was in school, there was a lot of conferences. We had, the Big 12, the Pac-10, the Big East, and now it's like Power 5. And even that is kind of sketchy, right? So I say that to say, again, you've got transfer portal, you've got NIL, you've got college football playoff, you've got new TV deals happening, where again, at Florida State, as of today, filed lawsuit against ACC, right? Saying that, hey, we don't believe we should pay this forfeiture fee. And it didn't have anything to do with, what transpired recently with an undefeated schedule. It's something that they had considered for the last year or two, right? Because they were not making the same revenue. They were, they're drawing more fans than the other teams in the conference. So these conferences are having to make financial decisions too. All the while, schools are having to figure out, how do I afford the top recruit, right? So that sounds great for an athlete coming in, like, who's the highest bidder, right? What's your perspective on, I guess, taking money? Let's say there's an individual right now. Let's see, I think he's being offered upwards of $20 million to stay in school. What would you do in his position?
If I was in the position to pocket $20 million to stay in school.
So he's what, about 21, 22
years old. I know who the individual is. So understanding, like I said, if I was him, understanding his background, what he has in place between his family and that situation, I would take that because I know that there's a team or a system in place for me to make that decision in a smart way. Or I wouldn't take it if the team advised against it. So it kind of just depends. I think like I said, I would take it unless the team said no. Right. But again, you have to have a team to say that. A lot of kids don't have that. So I would even ask you, like, how would you go at this situation if you're somebody not that person that has a team? That doesn't have a team. So.
So when we're talking about team, we're talking about those advisors that have experience in these sort of, negotiations, right? You hope have some negotiation that's experience. And to be quite honest, I'm imagining, in this particular case, they do have a little more experience, right? But how many families really have experience in what to do if there's more money that you've made in your life sitting in front of not your table, but child's, table. And I say child, loosely, because again, you'll always be mama's baby, right? But the reality is that a team member should look at, again, what do we have to gain? And in that situation, I think my advice would be, you take the money. And it's not because of the reason I think people would assume I would say take the money, right? Because I'm a proponent of the idea that, there's no free money, right? This university is not offering this young man money because he's just a stand-up guy, although I bet he is a stand-up guy and definitely comes from a stand-up family, right? But like you said, it's a business, right? And so they stand to gain. What do they stand to gain, right? So if you look at the economics of it, we talked about off camera, partnering with brands, or your brand partnering with brands, or and understanding how your brand could partner with brands. So in his case, his brand right now is top collegiate football player, like top 3, right? Arguably. and possible Heisman candidate, right? So just the use of the Heisman, right, or being associated with a Heisman Watch person or a Butt Kiss Watch person, all those awards that come in college, right, now brings a level of awareness and a level of attention to your university, right, that you are not paying for. Again, we talked about those TV contracts, right? Exactly. The more you have a reason for people wanting to see your team, more of those, you're going to get bumped to the primetime game, right? Look at Dion at Colorado, right? Yeah. Who would have thought that Colorado, who won one game, for every year for the last, however many years before he got there, was now prime time, when they were winning, when they were upsetting people in the beginning. So again, you got to draw. They're going to pay you money to be in those prime spots because advertisers are coming. So, that seems, like I said, great for the university, but what about that kid? And so the decision would go beyond just, again, taking money. What are you going to do with it? Exactly. And why I think it's so imperative now for individuals to not just look at the easy question, because honestly, if it's $1 million or 10 million, you don't have that opportunity anywhere else as a 21, 20-year-old student, right? Unless you are some, Twitch player or, playing video games and still talking about the 1%, probably of the 1% that's able to make $1 million+ at a young age, right? But what do you do after it? How do you begin to prepare and understand how we take that free money and turn it into long-term money, right? So I always say free money is seed money, right? It's not an opportunity for you to just, spend it on whatever. It is an opportunity not just to buy assets, because I think the asset is you as player first, right? So I'm a proponent of the idea that, if you are a player or you are a family member that has, a player that is, wanting to be a part of this NIL landscape, it is imperative that you decide I am a business, right? And you have to make it like plant your flag in the sand and say, this is what I'm doing, because we're not talking about little dollars. And if they're offering 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, you add a zero behind it. That's probably what they stand to make off of you, right? Yep. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no business, right? No business operates at a loss for you.
When we say that again, say that one more time.
No business operates at a loss for you. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. Anything somebody is selling, there's profit baked in the price if they're a smart business owner or have smart business systems associated with it. So when you look at it and say, all right, cool, I'm getting 20 million, then the potential is 200 million in terms of revenue, mm-hmm, right? If I'm only getting 10% of it, mm-hmm, then you have to ask yourself, how do I then, again, take the business that I'm collaborating with and pull a model from them, seeing how they're running things, mm-hmm, and then build my own brand, my own personal business that also says, okay, cool, I'm going to leverage my audience to put this money in, like you said, not only buying assets, but making myself the asset in terms of how I run my brand. And then I can say, okay, cool, I made 10 million. Let me figure out how to make this 10 million make me as a brand, myself, 100 million.
Right.
And what does that look like? And then you have to understand that no business has just one individual that's a big business.
Correct.
Right? College football teams don't just have a quarterback.
Correct.
They have O-line, they have D-line, DBs, coaches, training staff, media.
It's called payroll.
Yeah, they got a payroll, right? So
right. At the cost of doing business, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you have to implement a team, and you have to understand you're either the CEO or the owner. If you're the owner, then you have to implement a CEO and you pull yourself out of the decision making as much. If you're a CEO, then you only want to really make the important decisions. Right. That's where we start looking at things like the Eisenhower matrix. I only do the things that are important and urgent. The other stuff gets scheduled, some stuff gets delegated, and BS gets deleted. And that's how you have to run and think about your life as a professional athlete or quote unquote an amateur athlete when you talk about being the NCAA. But at this point, if you're getting paid for anything, I remember when I first jumped into brand coaching and production and things of that nature, people told me, if you got paid for it, you're a professional. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's $5, if it's $500, if it's $5 million. If somebody paid you to do it, somebody paid you to do a service, you are now considered a professional. So if you don't act like that after knowing that or knowing this now, then there's nothing that someone else can do for you. You have to understand that and start taking steps to act in that manner. So that's what I would say to it. You have to run yourself like a business. You are a CEO. CEOs have other executives alongside them to help them make decisions because you're not the smartest person in the room. right? And not saying that you're not smart, but you're not the smartest person in the room in certain aspects. Some people are better than you at marketing. Some people are better than you at finance, or maybe you're the best at finance and you need to make sure you got somebody around you that's good at marketing. But you have to put a team together. You can't do it alone because no big business and nothing that you say you want as an athlete is going to happen by you just trying to do it alone.
Right.
And you put yourself in a situation to be a part of that statistic that you mentioned earlier.
So if you're just joining us again, I'm Kristen Campbell. I have Malik Mayweather. We are talking about NIL, the business of NIL, and I want to jump into that because I had you go through your schedule as a collegiate athlete,
Right.
D1 athlete, and we're talking 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. And so we're
PM.
talking PM, not 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., right? So we are now saying, and again, we're saying this intentionally, we're both in consensus that building a team for a multi-million-dollar collegiate athlete that's receiving this deal from a university is imperative to his success,
Yes.
correct?
Absolutely.
Where is he going to find the time and the people to do that?
He's gonna call the 40 group.
He's gonna call the 40 group. That's first and foremost.
Definitely gonna
right?
call the 40
right?
group.
But let's jump into that, right? Because the reality is, like I said, and why we talked about professionalism before, there's already a lot on players' plates, right? There's already they're having to, again, you go to college to learn, right? You go to college to get this educational experience, which again, the scholarship was supposed to be that bridge. We're giving you free money to get a free education, despite the fact that your education was in X's and O's, right? First and foremost, right? So what ways, like how can, and again, I think I'm asking this to ask, you have asked me, but is it realistic for a college athlete to be able to delegate time in order to put that team together? What do you think, or how does he find that time?
So there's time in the curriculum in their day for them to focus on these things. We have mandatory study hall that happens when you're a freshman, and I ended up being able to get out of it because I just didn't like being watched over, so I did what I was supposed to do. But once that time gets freed up, that's time where you were going to be sitting doing whatever for school anyway, right? If you can get out of that time block, that restriction, then you have a 2 to 4 hour window where you can now start pushing to look for some of these things, right? Whether that's talking to your advisors or talking to individuals that are in the spaces you want to be in. Social media has made that way more accessible. I'm not saying just reach out to strangers because there are a lot of people that are out to take advantage of you, but there are safe avenues within your programs if you're studying things that you're interested in. And that's another point that makes it a lot harder to answer this question than I think, is that the fact that most of these kids are taking sports management, business admin, and they might be interested in something else. So if you can figure out what the kid is actually interested in and put them in that environment, it makes it a lot easier for them to find that team or find people in the spaces that have done what they are trying to do outside of sports. And that team can come from having those conversations because your environment is stronger than your willpower. If I immerse myself around winners in the industries that I'm interested in, whether that's football or whether that's music, whether that's culinary, whether it's actually business. I studied healthcare in school, health admin. Because I studied that, I talked to team doctors. They linked me up with administrators in U Health. And that's how I got my first internship in the midst of trying to figure out how in the world am I going to get an internship while playing ball. Because I thought that if I didn't make it, that I would need something to do, or I would at least need to make use of my degree. And I was like, this is the only way I feel like I'm gonna be able to do that. I need somebody to vouch for me because I wasn't a regular student who had the time to go get this stuff and do these internships.
Right.
So I think taking advantage of getting out of the study hall block or asking to use the study hall block is the first step.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of your time that if you handle your business on the academic side, you can use the other time to actually ask people to put you in position and in contact with people. Because at the end of the day, it's too many resources at a D1 level for anybody to fail. Whether that's class, whether that's fail to build a network, whether it's fail to get healthy from an injury, right? We talking catastrophic blown out knees where people come back and they play and they have great careers because of the way medicine has advanced. So you have resources. It's just about utilizing them. And that starts with a mindset, right?
So The mindset is so important. We talk about wealth mindset approach and deciding what you want, right? And I have to be honest with you. I encounter a lot of people when I tell them what I do. They're like, "Oh, these guys should do this and they should do that with their money," and that sounds really easy. And I'm gonna be honest. If I was 21 making 10 million, I probably would have lost a few dollars, right?
Yeah.
A couple of few, right?
Look.
And so why that can't, like, for me, why, what we're doing here at 40 Sports, why it's important for us to, have conversations like this and talk about more than just the money that's out there, but truly what to do once you get the money. Because again, growing up in a time where I know a lot of individuals that have gone pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot more individuals that might not have anything to show for it, right? To have people assume whether you work in the business or out of the business, that, oh, it's just kind of, these guys lose all their money. They make these decisions and that bothers me, right?
Yeah.
It's always bothered me. And when I first came into this business, I didn't have a desire to be an agent because I was afraid, like, again, I'd heard the horror stories of, there's some sharks out there, right? And everyone is coming and recruiting based upon the access to that commission, right, off of $1 million contracts. But who's really protecting the athlete, right? Because like you said, they have the rigor of school, the rigor of developing, and you talked about that. Like, you're going into college, and how much weight did you gain, and how much muscle mass did you gain while being in college, right?
I went in at about 170 to 175.
Mm-hmm.
I left 195, so I
Right.
definitely gained 20 over that time span, and I muscle mass definitely
Right.
increased immediately, right?
Right.
So I mean, just, you're talking about developing as a young man. You're talking about experiences,
Mm-hmm.
because we could talk about NIL and the money all day, but a lot of the stuff that comes with that money, or even just being a college football player, even if you don't make money, is different experiences that you get throughout the city or the town that your college is in, and who you run into, and navigating campus,
Mm-hmm.
and navigating conversations with professors that don't care about sports.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So all of those different things factor into your development when it comes to how do I handle this money, or handle this newfound fame, quote
Right.
unquote, because at the end of the day, there's money and then there's access, and there's certain things that money can't buy, and there's certain access that you're not going to get regardless of who you are, just because that's just how it's set up in some rooms.
Right. Right.
So
So you have, again, if you're just joining us, I'm Kristen Campbell. I've got Malik Mayweather. I'm from 40 Sports, and Malik is a former D1 athlete, also an entrepreneur and brand coach. And we're talking about NIL, the current state of NIL, and how to succeed in the sports business. So at the end, I shouldn't say at the end of the day, because really we're at the beginning of the day, right?
Yeah.
We are just now, like I said, 2019 was
journey.
Austin versus US. That was a Supreme Court case that said, okay, fine, we're going to let players make money in college. So we're only roughly going on 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in the state of Florida, 2021 is when it became, I guess, legal to be able to use your name, image, or make money off of your name, image, likeness in our state, and other states have soon followed. So Florida is one of the first states that have taken advantage of it. And I've seen different companies that have attached themselves to universities, and they promote. We have, NIL deals. I see collectives that are out there, promoting, we'll get you money if you just come here, right? And to be honest, I see all of the big money floating to the top, and a lot of the smaller money trickling down. So, the expectation that families and players can have, being not even being realistic, but the way that the game is. And again, I want us to focus on the big picture, and then kind of to get micro about it, is that, I don't believe any student athlete has the ability to fumble this bag. Meaning, like I said, we cannot have another 40, 50 years of college athletics where now there's opportunity to capitalize on, your brand and monetize your ability to make a brand. But the idea that, like I said, free money, this money being given out as free money, I think has to be the first thing that goes out of mine. And again, we start looking at that money as seed money. Money to begin your startup as, Athlete Inc. That's my perspective. And like I said before, with the understanding that, well, who do I trust? When do I have the time? How do I go about doing that? because I know for a fact no player wants to go broke. No player usually intends to go broke. But I think the pitfalls that I see are, number one, not really understanding how to begin the process. Number two, not making the amount of money the only source of, I guess, or determination of success, instead of what kind of life I want to live, what kind of long-term life I want to live, especially considering that most careers in the NFL are only lasting less than 3 years, and that is a special number on purpose. And then also not really learning how to leverage, like you said, the existing situation that you're in with, alumni, with professors, with just the college ecosystem that is a world of resource for a player, and how to actually navigate that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So I can only speak from my experience on it, right? A couple of injuries were what held me back in some facets, and once I realized that, okay, cool, there's a brand to be had here about Malik Mayweather, former University of Miami football player, um, understood how to operate because of the corporate internship that I had through the relationships that I built at the University of Miami. I've connected the dots, and it came from something that somebody told me in the locker room. One of my old teammates, DJ Johnson, he said, "Figure it out early," and that's what this is about today. It's about giving parents, student athletes, uh, guardians, coaches, mentors, anybody who's involved with these athletes and helping them make these important decisions. It's about helping them figure out what their brand is early, so that when they take advantage of NIL, they can build a brand and, like you said, have that seed money, not free money, that seed money to start backing that. Things that I didn't have. Now, if you're an individual who, let's say you said, people can squander the money, right? Because they just don't understand what they're doing. Maybe they don't have the financial literacy. That's where you jump into my territory, because I didn't have what you have. The first thing I did was looked at, what can I do with what I know, based on what I've learned in school, relationships I've built, understanding that I'm an athlete and I know how to work out. So the first thing I did was start a fitness brand, Unconquered Fitness. Me and my best friend started, both of us former college athletes. And I realized, okay, cool. The first thing I have to do is figure out how to use this skill set. The second thing I need to do is figure out how to get clientele so I can monetize it. And then it started to hit me that, okay, cool, this is, people are coming to this business because of Malik, because of Marcus LaFleur, because of us being athletes. People are coming because of that, not because I put a good name to it or I had a fancy logo. So once I realized that it was about the person, I said, okay, cool. You can't really separate the person from the brand that much unless you start implementing teams. And that's where the whole team aspect came into play when we spoke earlier on that and needing a team. So the same things that we're telling you right now are the same things that I found out absent of NIL. So these principles exist regardless if you get the money or not.
Right.
That's what we're trying to get through today, is that, hey, if I'm navigating this, well, then I need to figure out, okay, what is a brand? What type of brand do I want? Okay, fitness, because I know how to work out. Okay, cool. How do I go about leverage?
And I think that's important, because I think branding often seems like, again, the big bill players all the time. Like, you've got all of these accolades behind your name, but brand really is who you are. Right? Yeah. When people see you, what do they think of? Right.
Exactly.
And as any student athlete, your sport is going to come first. But the more that you interact with people, they get to learn your passions, your hobbies, and things like that. And you start to learn a little bit more about yourself. So, I think the branding is important, and to be, part of me, branding is even more important, because I think a lot of people don't understand how, when you make it to, and this is another reason why I think I would advise that young player that's being offered a lot of NIL money to take the money now, is that it's also how you're taxed, right? Because when you get into a professional league, in an NBA, NFL, NBA, you are on a W-2.
Yep.
Right? You're taxed at a W-2 rate, right? Versus if you are a company that has a brand. And again, like for my players, we always do LLCs for marketing money, because again, you are your own company, right? That is taxed differently than that W-2 employee, right? Significantly, right? Because if anyone's ever heard of the jock tax, right?
Yep.
And one of my we know California, New York are going to hit you over the head with taxes. And the jog tax has a funny story. I think what I've heard is the jog tax was actually brought about by Michael Jordan because he would beat the Lakers all the time. And so they implemented the jog tax as almost like a revenge game. I don't know how, accurate that is, but that is the story. So again, you're creating your own opportunity, and own brand that's not just for you. It has significant tax advantages if you capitalize or if you're able to form that separate corporation outside of your, what your employer is going to give you. So for that young man, he's receiving marketing dollars, right? He's not receiving professional pay as an employee of this university, right? He is not a state employee. He's not, an actual employee of that university. He is a contractor.
Yep.
And the amount that he's going to be taxed just in and of itself is going to be less than what he would be taxed if he played in the NFL. So again, the considerations, like I say, go a lot further beyond than just the money, what we see at the bottom line, right?
Right. And how many 18-year-olds actually understand corporate tax structure?
Correct. Right.
Like I didn't.
Right.
And
are you supposed to?
Exactly. Right. So that's where it goes into the team.
Right.
You can't do this alone.
So how, I've had, someone say to me, right, but like you said, there are, and I know this, there are plenty of people out here that seem like they're good, but how do I know that they're good? Like, how would somebody go about doing a due diligence? Like, someone had a great example of, my mom is a CPA and my dad played, professionally, I want them to do it. Right. And my question to them was, all right, how many, $10 million companies have they run? And it's like, well, hold on, but they know this. But that, again, I'm not saying that you don't trust your parents. And I believe that they're probably the best people to make decisions or help you make decisions. But how many $10 million companies have they actually run? Right. And the significance of that is not to say that they don't know, but they don't know what they don't know. Right. If you are making $10 million now, more than likely your future earnings are going to be a little bit more. It can be quite greater than that. You could probably increase them 10 to 100-fold if you'd like to, right? But how do you do that if your base doesn't have that information, right? And so I say that to say I had a conversation. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Maverick Carter once, and that was kind of my question. Like, how did you guys, like I said, LeBron is a phenom. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But you all, his friends have become, respected players in the sports business game in and of yourself. Like how? And I thought it was so important that, he let me know that, again, they all played together in high school. And LeBron is going off into this trajectory that, like I said, I'm a huge fan just of his business acumen and obviously his ability to ask questions and reach out to people and put these teams together very early, right? Which is what he did. But he also leveraged his position to help his friends get on that speed as well, right? So Maverick said, and I'm paraphrasing, they were in college while he's playing in the pros. And so, for instance, like in the summers, he's doing internships with Nike, right? Because LeBron has a deal with Nike. But he's not just doing the internship, he is, with the decision makers, right? So he's getting experience, not just as, I worked at Nike and it was fun and I had a great experience, but he's learning how to be at that level to probably, I wouldn't be surprised if LeBron said, I'm going to be $1 billion brand, right? Because again, if you're wanting to make sure that those individuals that are part of your team have the resources to be able to support what you're doing, right? Why I asked, do you have your parents managed a $100 million company? They might not have, but that does not mean that they cannot get the resources, get the education in order to get to that point, right? But first and foremost, you have to have a plan. You have to have a goal, right? So another reason why I brought you here today is that you have a whole outline about goal setting, about, kind of figuring out your path to success, right? Mm-hmm. And can you talk to me about how you came up with that and why it was important for you to come up with it?
Yeah, so my outline is less monetary and it's more understanding who you are, because before you can go in any direction and take any steps, you have to understand where you're going. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point of a plan, obviously.
But can't money take you there?
Money can take you there, but you can lose the money along the way.
Right. And I'm being sarcastic because, again, I think that money does seem to be, the thing that is the cure-all. I think a lot of times, especially if you haven't had it. And like I said, having built a business and building it from a franchise structure and also building one from scratch, right? Mm-hmm. we talked about relationships, and we talked about just the outside resources that money can't buy. You don't learn until you're kind of in it, right? So keep going.
Yeah, no. So the plan has to start with a passion or purpose, right? Whichever is your buzzword, because I believe they're one and the same in most aspects. You have to figure out that, because once you can figure out that, all right, cool, I know what rooms I want to try to be in, and then it's about getting exposure to that. Right?
So when you were first coming up with these ideas, did you dream big, or were you just trying? And where was your mindset the first time you
So
did this?
to be really open and transparent, my mindset was that of depression because I didn't make it.
Really?
I was going through a state where, and I've done a TED talk on this as well, at TEDx U Miami. So TEDx U Miami event, I've done it on this, but you can go watch that. But I was depressed. I was trying to figure out what I was doing, where I was going. It didn't seem like anything was working. How do I get myself out of this space where I feel like all I am is this sport? Because that's all I've done for the last 23 years. Like, how do I get myself to understanding? Because I started looking at everything and I'm like, well, it's cool to go to the NFL, MLB, whatever, but I'm looking at Jeff Bezos at 200 billion. I'm looking at Zuck, hundreds of billions. So I'm saying, like, well, they're playing a different game and they're making more than I ever probably would have made if I'd have made it to the league. So there's another game to be played out here if I want money. But I have to figure out what direction I want to go, because if I'm passionate about it, there's somebody else passionate about it. And I'm only probably going to be good at things that I'm passionate about. So that's where the passion came from. Exposure was like, okay, now that I know that I'm passionate about fitness, because that was the first business, how do I get in the right spots? I started going to Planet Fitness, literally going to Planet Fitness, and I started DMing people that used to play sports or that I went to high school with, because at this point I had gone back to the Mid-South area, and I was like, okay, cool, do you need a trainer? And then I was like, all right, bet. And then I had to be resilient, right? That's the next step. That's the next step in the plan, because it's not easy, especially when you start realizing that you're probably not charging enough, but you just wanted to make some money. You wanted to see some progress, and that success kind of is like an initial high.
You're trying to survive.
Yeah, you're trying to survive, right? And yet it's an initial high, and you got to be resilient through that, because that's when you start learning the most. It's like, okay, this is cool. I like it. I'm passionate about it, but it ain't necessarily the money I thought I would be making, but I'm not. I don't hate it.
Right.
So cool. And then it's like, all right, bet. From that resilience, you find people that admire what you're doing because they see that you're trying to do things the right way. And that's where you start getting that solidarity component. Who are people that are going to stand with me? Right. And then from there, you get more opportunities. And the last part is nurturing those opportunities. Right. And if you break it down, that spells the word person. So that's how I became a person, because at first I was just an athlete to myself. I essentially got back to myself and was like, okay, this is Malik, the person, not
Break
Malik.
down the person again.
Passion, exposure, resilience, solidarity, opportunity, nurture. PERSON.
I like that. That's a good one. Hi, if you're just joining us again, I am Kristen Campbell. I'm here with Malik Mayweather. I'm from 40 Sports and Entertainment Group. We are talking about NIL. We are talking about branding in particular. Malik is sharing his experience of going from university to on your own, right?
Yeah.
Football, like I said, 23 years you have been playing this sport, and it's over. It's done, right? And that happens for a lot of college athletes. And it's what happens next, right? And, you are the pre-NIL era, but have still been able to build that brand based upon your experience at a university that had a legacy and had alumni that kind of taught you, again, to carry yourself a certain way, right? You weren't just representing yourself, you were representing those that came before you and those that will come after you, right? You talk about the relationships, just DMing people in the gym and saying, hey, you need, or DMing old players that you had worked with, old teammates that you'd worked with, right? So you had kind of a built-in network. You didn't have to go out and spend some money to build this personal brand, because it was, you used what you had based upon where you had come from. But you also talked about the resilience of kind of figuring out, okay, this is a culture shock. The reality is, again, as glamorous, again, as we look at the league and the opportunity as a league, we're talking about the 1% of the 1%. So you've got 32 teams drafting in the NFL, and you've got 7 rounds. Do the math, and that's not. There are how many tens of thousands of student athletes just in football, in men's football, just in football, right? So what you've experienced is not unheard of, right? That's going to be a lot of people, a lot of individuals reality, after college, right? So
Yes.
tell me more about what happened next and how you continue to evolve.
So after I started evolving with that business, I understood that it needed to have a team component. I started to invest, right? So it went back to the mindset piece. I realized that one, iPhone footage wasn't gonna cut it. Even though I was making some money, I started to invest in my marketing structure and actually saying, okay, how do we actually level up a brand? And everything that I did was self-taught. And this isn't like a praise me moment because I taught myself all this self-taught, because I'd rather have not, because it put me in a position where I've recently had to learn how to actually implement the teams that we're talking about. Because starting off from where I started with nothing, kind of like the power of broke, Damon John, I had to figure out how to do web development, photo, video, editing. I had to figure out how to put workout plans together. I had to figure out how to market. I had to do an outreach strategy. I had to do all these entrepreneurial things that teach you about business and your business specifically. When you talk about what business you're in at that point, fitness, now brand coaching and brand strategy for people. I had to take all those same things and elevate every aspect of that.
Right.
So that was the next component. And that's been a culmination of the last, 5 years of entrepreneurship. Because you initially, again, jumped into it. I say, it's kind of like real estate or just starting an LLC or business or something like that. It takes you not really long to set those things up or get those licenses, etc., but it takes you 5-10 years to really learn it unless you're, you know, sped up by mentorship or accelerator. So I learned all these things, and then I started diving into mentors because I was like, I just learned all these things, I put them all in place, and it's still not growing like I thought it would.
Right.
Right. This whole dream and entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship or making it to the league or any type of money, any type of thing that's glamorized on social media of you being your own boss or your own entity, your own brand is sexy. Right.
Right.
This is the thing to do.
Right.
But they don't show you the other side of it, like what we're talking about right now. So the next part was finding other people that would actually give me the raw. You don't really. I had a professor, right? Because I ended up going back and getting my master's. That was the in between point of starting the business. Okay, cool. The business ain't making that much. I'm gonna go back and get my master's because I'm not ready to start paying back some of the debt that I incurred to try to invest in this business.
Right.
Let me figure out who I need to be around that's gonna give me the raw.
Right.
Eric Chris, one of the most influential professors I've ever had. I called him prior to me exiting healthcare. I was working in healthcare at one point. And I told him about what I was going to do with the fitness business and how I wanted to align it with the marketing and the brand coaching and the strategy. And I was so high on the brand coaching because it was my next thing.
Right.
And he brought me back down there. He said, you don't really have a business. You got a good plan. The margins look good on paper. But who you are and who you have been as a brand, what I have built up to this point, has been this thing on the fitness side. But I'm looking at the fitness thing and saying, well, how do I make the fitness thing work with some of the math that wasn't adding up as far as like having a building? Do you want to go in for a building right now? What does that look like? The market crashes, COVID happens. Like, that's not a smart decision.
Right.
So how do I actually make this marketing thing work? Well, I got to rebrand. Well, guess what I did when I rebranded? It took me less time to rebrand into the brand coaching and the brand strategy and the marketing for Malik than it did to start the fitness, because I had done the fitness and got the tutelage from experience and other people.
Right.
So the next component after figuring out that passion was mentorship and tutelage. And then the next component after that is now implementing the systems to scale. And then also understanding I don't have to make all the money.
Right.
I think that's the component that we really got to get through to people when it comes to NIL. You don't have to make all the money for you to live a good life.
Right.
You can talk about making 10% of $1 billion. That's a lot of money. Or you can go try to make 2 million on your own and be stressed out and not have any real freedom.
Right. So you come from, like I said, my people are from Mississippi, and I will say one of the biggest transitions I had to make being an entrepreneur, and again, my family, they're hard workers, and education is first, and hard work is first, and but the transition was going from that hard work to being able to be that one that makes sure not just the hard work is done, but the vision is carried out. So transitioning between worker to CEO, right?
Mhm.
It sounds like that you were making that switch. You started to realize like I can't make this company profitable unless my focus is on we're making a lot of money, but are we keeping it? Are we
Right.
spending it? Am I making so many mistakes, or am I, spending too much time on things that I could really outsource and save money by hiring someone than doing it myself, right?
Yep.
So I think we're talking about things that make sense, but really are
Mhm.
a paradigm shift from going especially as a young student athlete, from player to both player and CEO once they decide to enter into this NIL realm, right? Because you're not just being asked to perform. That's your day job, right?
Mhm.
But this company is going to have marketing. It's going to have the expenses of, more than likely in the beginning, a masseuse, a
Right.
trainer, a cook, maybe a marketing person, more than likely, depending on just be how much money you stand to make based upon your personal
And
brand
not to mention
existing.
that, but having the right people around you, a lot of this is energy,
Mhm.
and these guys want to have their entourage,
Right.
and that's a quick way that people do go broke,
Yeah.
right? So
Funding that.
understanding who actually should be in your entourage, and it's kind of
Correct.
like Magic Johnson when he talked about, well, when I was making 1 million, I was here, and when I'm making 100 million, I'm here.
Right.
So I can't talk about $1 million things when we're talking at the $100 million level. So understanding who can go there,
Right.
and if they're
Right.
not willing to elevate and go there, and take heed to the position that you're trying to put them in, then they have to be left behind. And that's a difficult
That
thing
is
to
very
do
hard. Yes.
as a kid,
Yep. It
let
is.
alone an adult. But
Mhm.
as a kid, when these are your guys that you spend every day with in high school or every day with in college, one thing I learned going through the pro day process is that you lose your team. And that's
Mhm.
where you start becoming very, very individualized when it comes to your training and your success.
Right.
You're the one that's going to train, and if you don't eat, that's your times and your drills and bench press and all that goes down. This is all on you.
Right.
You're not going to get another team until you get signed, if that happens,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's a very real reality. And nobody likes to talk about plan B or C, but my whole thing is none of it is plan B, C, or nothing. It's only plan A, and plan A is you. Who
Right.
are you as a brand?
Correct.
Because you're more than an athlete.
I love that, and I'm glad we ended on that. We are almost towards the end, and we do have some people in studio that I think might have some questions. RJ, you got a question for me over there? Bring them on. And again, if you're tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. We are happy to have you. If you like this conversation, again, we're doing this the third Friday of every month. Let someone know that you've seen us, that you enjoyed what you've seen. Make sure that you comment in our comment section and ask any questions that you have, so we can try to answer them as well.
Sure.
All right, how you doing today?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Thank you for the conversation. In the beginning, you mentioned that when you're a student athlete and you're just coming on, when he was going over his schedule, you have to keep in the back of your head not only the to dos physically, but then that mental component of, okay, they're looking to replace you. There's always competition there. So now you also introduce this whole thing of the name, image, and likeness. So now I have to manage that. You mentioned a team. How am I at 19 years old supposed to juggle all these things, knowing that I have to constantly work on A, not being replaced, B, managing me, and C, formulating a team as well as keeping my academics up?
Right.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And one of the components of that is very, very heavily rooted in the schedule. So you don't get to choose your schedule for the most part outside of like choosing your major. And the first 2 years are really just general ed. So you have to be at lifts. You have to be at dinner and breakfast, and you have to eat your snack. You have to be at practice. These are things that you don't. These are non-negotiables for you to be on this team. So you're not really worried about that. That's just what you do. So when you talk about building the team outside of that, then there's that component of, like I said, this is why I said I think that the first actionable thing that you can do if you're trying to build a team is to figure out how to do well enough to get out of that mandatory study hall, or if you can't get out that mandatory study hall, dedicate an hour or so of that 4 hours or so to talking to an advisor, somebody in your major, a professor, something like that. Start the conversation. It's not something that's going to happen in year 1, year 2, year 3. If you get NIL deals, then it might happen faster, but you have the money to bring the right people around you. But if there's no NIL, right? If we're just talking about how do you manage this, absent money, absent thinking of any of that, it's about starting that conversation. And the thing about a conversation is it can end with action items. So you want to make sure that when you start that conversation, you say, okay, cool, we're having this conversation. What do you think should be my next step as a trusted advisor who wants the best for me at this university, as my professor, as my academic advisor, as the player development guy? These are conversations, and these are people that are here to help you that often honestly get underutilized. Players don't go to them as much as they should, and it's due to, again, it not being pushed. But at this moment now, where we are in history in terms of college sports and NCAA NIL deals, you now have no choice but to start having these conversations if you want to take advantage of it. Now, if you don't want to take advantage of it, that's a different conversation. But we're talking to people that want to take advantage of it. Start the conversation. I don't care if it's an email, if it's a phone call, if it's a face-to-face with a certain advisor in the building. There are people in these organizations to help you make these decisions that don't have any actual ties to your performance. There are team psychologists that are at each individual university on these football teams. You know what I'm saying? These are people you can talk to that could care less about your performance. They just want you to do well as a person. So those are the people you start to talk to, because that helps you get on the pathway of the steps that I just spoke about, figuring out your passion, figuring out how you get exposure to it, etc. These are conversations that are not going to be people looking at you like, okay, cool, I'm telling you this, but I really just want to talk about, do you understand what route to run on this play, this call, if this happens on the field?
I would add to that. Don't be afraid, again, to go to the school of business. Don't be afraid to go to the school of journalism, the school of videography, whatever it might be. Because, again, especially with state schools, it's free and you're a student, right? So there are individuals that have a vested interest in your success, right? So don't be afraid to go and say, hey, what do you know about this? But going back to the initial part of the conversation, you got to know what to ask them, right? You got to know what you want. Got to know what you're trying to achieve, right? So if it's simply, I want a $10 million brand, all right, what does that look like? And you will have, I'm sure if you go to the business school and find a marketing department professor and he's like, well, have you done a SWOT analysis? What's a SWOT analysis? What are your strengths, weaknesses, and talents, right? So what does that have to do with what I'm talking about? And you start to get lessons and things that you might have an interest in, or you might find like that's over me. I might need to hire that person, right? Or I might need to find someone that's in the school of business that's a student that has an interest in this type of thing. Let me build relationships with individuals that are going to have careers one day, right? I think that's one of the best things about college is that everybody's trying to make it. Everybody is there to further their career. Some will have professional athletic careers. Some of them will be CEOs of companies other days, but you are building a network while you're there. So take advantage of that. But also, like I said, I think it's just as imperative to decide, again, that you are a business and you have to start asking questions that drive that forward, not just from the work that you do on the field. Because like you said, you got your hands full and there's a lot to consider. But there's also the thought of, again, not so much how much is it going to cost me, but how much can I gain to get to where I'm trying to go.
Got you. And I just want to make sure that we keep it as clear as possible. Like what we're telling them to do is not anything intricate or that takes up a lot of time, because you're tired. I played D1 sports. You are tired. Some things you don't want to do. Sometimes you go rest, even if it's for 30 minutes. I'm asking to do as little as sending an email to set up 30 minutes on one day, or 30 minutes one day a week recurring, to start getting clarity. The best thing you can do is to try to find clarity first. If you don't have clarity, you start walking over here a little bit, walking over there a little bit, you walk forward, you step back, and you look and say, man, if I'd have just found some clarity, sat here and figured out where I wanted to go, I could be 17 steps ahead. But instead, I'm only 3 because I couldn't sit down and really try to figure out what it is that I'm trying to build in terms of my brand.
That reminds me of and you're probably familiar with this with football, is that you have to make adjustments sometimes.
Yeah.
When there's an injury and there's, personnel has changed, you got to change your game to the personnel on the field, right? Business is the same way, right? You're having to make adjustments and you're having to pivot and say, okay, that didn't work. where, because it's not getting me where I need to get, right? And it's not getting me where I need to go. How do I pivot? How do I make adjustments? And understand that's a part of business. Because I think a lot of times people make it look good, right? When you hear those $100 million stories, but it took some work to get there. It took some focus to get there, and also it probably took some changes around the way. So don't be afraid if it's not linear, right? Your
Right.
path to success is not direct. There are going to be some ups, downs, and around the corners and spin backs and everything else, but you will get to the other side.
Yep.
All right, we got another question. Hi, thanks for showing up today. Happy to have you.
Thank you. So, quick question regarding branding. Is your focus to eventually, in the future, the near future, to solely work with current or post professional athletes? And if so, how do you pick your clients, or do they pick you?
So that's a great question. So I think that we're having an entrepreneurship question, right? So my background is, owning businesses. I've been in the franchise business. I've been in the sports business for the last 13 years. So my goal has always been to make sure that players were taken care of during and after football. Our mantra at 40 Sports is we help players create and protect their revenue streams, right? And that's important because, again, I've seen so many of my peers, make so much money and then have nothing to show for it. And I wish they were my clients, but I've been able to create a system that's facilitating this journey, right? And especially now, like before, players didn't have the option to be able to start early with their business, right? Be in college and begin and learn while they're making money to until they get to the other side, right? Whether it be professionalism or they are professionally exploiting their brand. So we want to align ourselves with individuals that have decided that I want to be a part of this NIL journey. I want to be a part of this entrepreneur journey. And I'm looking for the resources. I'm looking for the individuals that have the experience and expertise in both business and sports, right? Understand the nuances of how to navigate those, because there are nuances. I always find it fascinating when I look at successful athletes, and most of them make more money after they've played football beyond their sports contracts than when they did. And that's because, again, they took advantage of their personal brand. And it's not always, the Hall of Fame player. It's not always the guy that's, the best player. It's one that's been able to connect with individuals. So to answer the second part of your question, we're looking for individuals that can connect with people, that have a story, that have that passion, that, are really interested and curious about, how far that they can go, and are receptive to building and growing their business as an athlete and becoming a CEO, and truly want to be that caliber uh, athletic brand.
And I'll answer that, and maybe I want to make sure I got the question correct and that I remember. So you're saying, are we looking to work with specifically post and current athletes that are looking to build their brands going forward while they're playing or even after they're playing, right? Got you.
I don't
Okay,
think you answered
so
that part.
so to answer so to answer that question, I have a little bit of a skewed perspective because I played, and I don't see athletes as athletes. I see them as people just like me. The only person I've ever been starstruck by was in the crowd looking at Kobe Bryant come to a University of Miami basketball game. But everybody else that I've ever run into, Ray Lewis, Michael Irvin, Reggie Wayne, anybody else, I've always looked at them like, you just like me. I just ain't made it to where you made it yet, but you just like me. You play ball, you practice on Green Tree, So when you ask that question, it's hard for me to answer from the perspective of, am I trying to specifically work with athletes because I see them as people? But from that standpoint, I do favor trying to work with athletes from a brand coaching or helping them get their business started, or they want to come in and they used to play sports and they want to create content with the team and push their narrative and their brand. I favor them because I understand them, and I've gone through what they've gone through trying to transition from athlete to entrepreneur, athlete to business owner, athlete to just regular person, right? And for that reason, I would say they pick me just as much as I pick them. but the conversation has to be started, and doing a good job at putting these types of platforms out there is how they're going to pick me. And it's also how I'm going to understand who I need to try to communicate and talk to try to pick them if I want to work with them, right? Because there are different tiers to this, right? There are tiers where it's okay, we're working together one on one, and like any business, you get to choose who you want to work with, because you have to be selective about people that are committed, right? But then when you get to the second tier, well, maybe it's just a course, or maybe it's just some, quarterly meetings, right? Or you're on a board of advisors or something for their company, or just for them as a personal brand coach. And then there's a other component where you might have resources for them to purchase, like ebooks, actual books, narratives that you write about your experience. So there's different tiers of this product and service that can be created to help them move along. So, yes, I love to work with athletes specifically, but I can't pigeonhole them because I don't just see them as athletes. I see them as people just like myself, and I'm always going to be an athlete, but I'm Malik. You know what I'm saying? And I look at, whoever, John Johnson. He's John, right? He plays sports, but he's bigger than that. And if I can tap into that with that individual, then we're going to be successful no matter what. Even if it's not as much money as you think you're gonna make, that person is gonna pursue something that makes them feel whole. And I think about this deeper than NIL. NIL is great, like you said, it's seed money. It's a medium for you to be able to express and build your brand. But at the end of the day, you have to be the correct type of individual for your family, for yourself, for all of the different aspects of life that you're going to live when that physical ceiling for you to play a sport ends. And that is what I want to get across to athletes, entrepreneurs, whoever. There is a physical ceiling on the things that you're going to be able to do. And your relationships and how you can use your brain to create opportunities for yourself and other people is how you're going to make your mark on this world.
I love it. Malik, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
it has
you.
been a pleasure having you. This is not the end of the conversation. This
Of
is
course
just the
not.
beginning. So, starting in January, we are going to have a full season that's going to happen from January all the way to June. We're going to be talking about everything from mental health, how to build your team, how to select individuals to help you further and move the ball, or move the chains, I guess we would say, in this business. So please join us starting again every third Friday of the month. You can join us online through YouTube, the links that you found. Malik, where can they find you at
You
online?
can find me anywhere on socials at Malik the Entrepreneur. That's IG, that's YouTube. And then if you want to email me, you got questions about working together, or just want to have a conversation about where you're going, we can set that up, and you just email me, Malik at MalikMayweather.com.
And if you're an athlete that's looking for representation, if you're looking for how to properly formulate your business, if you're looking for any contract review, any intellectual property protection, you can reach out to 40 Storts. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Drop us a line, give us a comment, reach out to us by phone or email. We will hit you back, and join us again next month. And have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Merry Kwanzaa. What else we got?
I don't know.
Whatever it might
Cinco
be.
de Mayo.
Yes, Hanukkah, all of the New Year, Happy New Year, all of that. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'm Kristen Campbell from 40 Sports. Have a happy holidays. We'll see you next time.
For sure.